Welcome to the Sleep Sense Show. As always, brought to you by the Sleep Sense program, where podcast listeners can get a free customized sleep plan by going to www.sleepsense.net/listen.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's show. I'm really excited for our guest today. Dr. Varma is here. She is a board-certified psychiatrist. She has appeared on many television programs. She's been on 2020. She's been on ABC World News. She's a frequent guest on the Dr. Oz show. And she's here today to talk to us a little bit more about what happens to our mental state after we have a baby. I think that not enough attention is paid to postpartum care in general for new moms. I don't think we have open and honest conversations about the reality of having a new baby and the demands and the physical and emotional pressures that are put on mothers today. We all know that there's a little bit of baby blues that often occurs after we have a child, but what happens when those baby blues start to slide into something a little more serious? I think that there's still some stigma around this discussion. I think that too many moms are suffering in silence with their mental state and how they're feeling, and it can be a scary conversation to have either with your spouse or with your medical care provider that you're having some feelings that don't feel so good to you. And we need to be okay with that. And we need to be supporting moms in every way that we can. They say it takes a village to raise a baby, but a lot of moms are isolated and we don't have family or friends around, or we're not asking for the help and support that we need. And so Dr. Varma is here today to give us a little more insight into some of the warning signs that we should maybe be watching for as new moms, and also as the people that support and love new mothers. What are some things that we can do to take good care of ourselves? What does self-care look like when we're new moms, and how can our spouses or partners support us in that? You can tell that she's extremely passionate about this topic. Dr. Varma dedicated her career to women's issues, and certainly postpartum depression and anxiety is something that she sees a lot and has a lot of really valuable advice to share. So stay tuned. It's a little longer of an interview than I normally run, but I hope you'll see, as I did, that it's just such an important topic that we really needed to give it time. We really needed to let the conversation play out. So enjoy, and I hope that, if there's any moms out there that are listening that gain some sort of insight or gives you a little bit of comfort, even that you're not alone, then I've done my job today. So enjoy. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm really excited to talk with our special guest today. Dr. Varma is here to talk to us a little bit more about postpartum depression and what we can do to help support moms who might be struggling. Welcome to the show, Dr. Varma.
Hi, Dina. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and why you decided to go into the field of helping women deal with postpartum depression?
Sure. So first and foremost, I'm a mom myself, and I know that it is an incredibly beautiful journey, but I also am very cognizant of the struggles that I think women face, and I don't think that I think that they're both on an individual level, family level, societal level, and sort of structural, systemic level. So, and as a psychiatrist, I'm also very interested in the bigger picture. So I think that conversations need to be had at every level of the things that I've mentioned, whether it be the healthcare system, whether it has to be the workplace that integrates women and understands human beings. I mean, in general, not just our roles as parents, but really as humans who have emotions, who go through things, I think on a governmental level, so policies need to be in place. So I really am somebody who sort of either in my personal life, the way that I approach things, and also in my professional life, I like to fix things before they're broken. And, as having trained in typical Western allopathic medicine, I think the emphasis is always wait for things to break, because really that's just how doctors are typically trained. And I feel like this is too important. Maternal mental health is so important to me, because you are going to affect the outcome of an entire generation. Mm-hmm. And if you are able to take care of the mom, and just the woman and just the individual before they even become a parent, before the woman becomes pregnant, during her pregnancy, after her pregnancy, in the early years to support her, we can really decrease mental health problems around the world. And we have seen that, we'll get into this in a minute, but what are some of the things, the challenges that women face when they're not being supported, when their mental health is not being supported, and the consequences that we see. Mm-hmm. So we know that untreated perinatal issues affects the mom in terms of her nutrition is something that might be affected. Her, sort of the health care that she receives, she may not be able to go to appointments. So I'll get into that in terms of like, what are the symptoms? How do you know that someone is experiencing depression both in pregnancy, afterwards? What are the risk factors associated with it? And what are some of the consequences? So I know that that's a mouthful to your question about how I got interested, but I would say that, in my practice, I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist. So I really believe in the value of changing the way that we think, to change the way we feel, to change our perception, to change our outlook, to be able to ask for the help. So assertiveness training is a big part of cognitive behavioral therapy. I also work with couples. I'm a couples therapist. And then if needed, medication, and that is also a part of my practice. But, there's a joke like, if everything if all you have is a hammer, everything is a nail, I don't just see medication as the only option. For me, it's a viable one. It's something that can really change and save a person when needed. But I also believe that there's a whole number of support systems and options and treatments that, should be looked at and are just as important, if not more.
I love that. It's so true. I think you're absolutely right in saying, what the mom, we've for centuries talked about the mom sort of being the heart of the family, the cornerstone of the family, happy mom, happy life. And I think it's true that it will affect generations to come if we don't have an honest conversation about mental health and making sure that we're supporting new moms. So I'm excited. I'm excited for this conversation. I think it's so, so important. So is there anything, so let's talk about just preparing for baby. Baby has not yet arrived, but is there anything that moms can do or families can do to prepare before a baby arrives to help minimize any risks of postpartum depression?
Yes. So, I think that one thing that we don't talk about enough are what are some of the challenges that women experience. And I feel like the more conversations that are to be had, one advice that a friend gave me when I was asking about what can I expect during the delivery and like that initial 1 week when I get home, I think that that's really important. But she was just also like, nobody prepares you for once you have the baby. What is life going to look like? Because I couldn't even conceive. At that point I was like trying to figure out what do I need to buy. So those are the logisticals, like getting the list, car seat, the crib, your clothes, getting a pump, breast pump, if that's the route you decide to go. Like there are logistical things that need to be bought. But then there's also conversations to be had about what does life look like 5 days postpartum. And that's when most most women are experiencing the postpartum blues, that there's supposed to be a major fluctuation in the female hormones and that we're a little bit more susceptible to feeling down. And recently I heard that there was some controversy around a commercial that was supposed to be on during the Super Bowl. I don't know if you heard about this, but it ended up not getting aired because it was thought to be showing too much information. And it was about a new mom in the first week postpartum and just all that she goes through, physically to take care of herself. So you hear a baby crying in the background. You see her sitting on a toilet, spraying, using water. And I was like, I said to my husband, I was like, oh my God, I've completely like blocked that phase out. Like, I don't even remember that. And I remember just those images of the few things that she had were such a strong reminder of the vulnerability that a woman experiences. Your body has completely gone to battle, and I feel like people need to tell you that you are creating another entire human being. You are going into something beautiful, but you're going into something life-changing. And, there's something to be said about that. You are going to be closing on one chapter, whether you like it or not. There's no judgment. And that's one thing I want to say to Anna, is like, no matter what I say, there's no judgment associated.
Right.
Either way, right? Like, it is what it is. And I don't think that we talk enough about the hard times, the sense of isolation that a lot of new moms feel, that when they're at home, if they don't already have a huge support system, a huge community, if their friends are not also delivering at the same time, and conflict and ambivalence about your role change, your independence, your body, your partner, your sex life, your job, other children that you might have had already that are in the home, or maybe you have friends who want to get pregnant and are struggling, and you don't feel comfortable sharing what you're going through because they would just tell you to shut up and you're so lucky, and then just the expectation of motherhood all being so cheery and happy, and then what's happening in the media, that we both vilify new moms who are out and wearing makeup, or there were some celebrities who was at night out in the town with her husband, and I had to do a piece for one of the TV stations about an interview, and she was seen out a few days afterwards, and people were putting her down like, how dare you? But hey, there's another camp that's like, all the more power to her. Her mom is watching the baby. Is there anything wrong with a woman wanting a night out with her husband after all of this? So I just feel like we need to have, first and foremost, to me, and to answer your question, in preparation for the biggest life transition. And even if you've had one or more kids already, every new baby is going to add a new layer, and there are logistical things that need to be figured out. And that's equally as important as the emotional space that needs to be created. And I think in general, like, we're finally moving to a society that is talking about feelings, like, so I know that this might feel new to people because they're like, forget about the baby. I don't talk about my feelings, period. I don't have, that's indulgent, that's self-indulgent, therapy, who goes to therapy? Only like crazy people. Like, so people have so many misconceptions about what it means to be a fully evolved, embodied human being who gets to have emotions, who gets to complain, and then there's the pregnancy stuff. Talk to your friends, ask them, what was the first 3 months like? What was the first week like? What are some of the things that you bought? What did you wish you knew more of? What did you keep stocked in the house? Who helped you?
Right.
Who didn't help you? What were the conversations that you had? Because I think it's very interesting to talk to your partner, about in the months leading up, or, nowadays I love the fact that couples go to therapy even before they're married, that they come very early on. So I feel like society is shifting in terms of willingness to talk, to engage and help. And during those like premarital sessions or couples counseling, because you're at an impasse because, maybe your husband or partner or whoever wants to bring in their mom and you don't feel excited about that idea, or you don't want to bring in your, family, like, who's going to take care of your kids? Who do you want around you during the delivery? Do you want a doula? Do you want a family member? Do you want, in postpartum, who do you want around you? So I feel like I could just give a list of a variety of things that you should ask about. What do you need physically, emotionally? Who are the support systems? Who's going to be doing the feeding?
Right.
What does that look like? And, so literally it's just like, imagine if you were going to be starting a new company, and you're like, what do we need? What's all the help? It's like all hands on deck. I kind of feel like it. And I think that the mistake that people make is not being prepared, not asking the tough questions, being afraid to ask for help from family members, because this is really the time. If you're ever going to ask for a favor from a neighbor, friend, or family, this is the time. And you know what? If you don't end up needing the help, like, that's fine. You don't have to take it. You could just say, listen, I just created a backup system, and then asking about leave from work, maternity leave, paternity leave. What are the policies? How long can you get? And then, I love it when people tell me, I've already figured out for the next 6 months, I'm going to have this family member and then this person and this partner, and we're each going to take 2-week shifts. I'm like, that's amazing that you guys are creative and you're thinking in advance.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really important. I can remember, I always tell my new consultants and the families that I work with that there's really two times in your life where people around you will like literally do anything you ask of them. One is your wedding day, and one is when you have the a baby. So take people up on those offers to help, because that will make them happy, right? To feel like they're helping you in some way, and it's not your burden, it's not your chore, it's not your job to handle, dinners and laundry and grocery shopping. And your job right now is to take care of yourself and your new precious baby. And those are big enough jobs alone without all the other pressures on top of it. So let's talk a little bit. You mentioned it, and I kind of wish we would think of a different name for it, because it almost sounds, it minimizes it in a way. But, that those first days or even the first week after you have a baby, we call it baby blues. But I can remember, experiencing it, and it felt a little bit bigger, that like I really don't think I was going down into postpartum depression, but this baby blues that people were talking about, it felt a little darker and a little heavier than just some light word like, oh, you're going to have a little bit of sadness. So talk to us about what would be considered normal, adjustment to hormone change, and even, not just hormone change, but sleep deprivation and doubt and fear and worry and all the stuff that happens the minute this baby is put into your arms. What would we sort of be watching for that would be, in the realm of normal feelings?
Yes. And, one thing I want to bring up is that, it's really important for a woman and a family to know about what the history has been, and that's going to inform how you're going to prepare. So if a person has had a history of depression, you have to have a plan, especially if the person is no longer in any form of treatment. Because the risk of reoccurrence during the peripartum time is very high, and thrown in with the additional stressors. So I would say, and in general, each episode of a depression that a person has puts them at risk for another episode regardless. So if you have had one history of one episode of a major depressive episode, it puts you at a 50% risk for a second one. And I'm not just talking about pregnancy, I'm saying in general. And if you've had two, it puts you at risk, for a 75% risk for another one. And if you've had three, more than 90. So not that I'm trying to be doom and gloom. I'm just saying part of the preparation and part of the conversation is, recognizing in the past what has helped you, and then speaking with a treatment provider to say, hey, I just want to let you know I'm thinking about getting pregnant, and even if it means you haven't been in treatment for like 10 years, you can reach out to someone new, you can reach out to the same person to say, is there anything I need to be aware of? And sometimes it doesn't hurt to have one visit to say, hey, I'm fine now. If things change, I just want you to have met me, to know who I am, and I don't have to go into the nitty-gritty when we meet. You'll know how to help me once, I get pregnant, if I get depressed then or right after.
That's a good tip.
So, I'm a big part of prevention is just like having dialogues, being proactive, and just the way women spend so much time like talking with their girlfriends about who did you recommend as an OB? And like, I know people, who put their name on a daycare like a year in advance before the kid is even born. So I'm like, you know what? Do the same for your mental health, whatever that means. Make a plan, and if that even means with a provider. But the blues, so if you've had a history, I would be a little bit more cautious in terms of not minimizing or dismissing what you're going through as being normal, right? And being very quick, especially if you've had a history, to say, hey, I am not letting this slide down. If my mood, I always ask people when patients come in to give me an objective rating as best as they can of where their mood is. So we do a check-in, on a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 is the best you've ever felt and 0 is, I'm down in the dumps and I don't feel like I want to live anymore. Where are you? And I know that really, may vary from person to person, but it gives me some sense. So if a woman says, I'm really feeling like below average, below a 5, and I'm at a 2 or a 3, and it's been going on for days, I'm concerned at that point. So for me, the blues are just, typical. I'm tired, but I'm fine. I feel supported by my partner. If you can say yes to all of these things, that like, whatever I'm experiencing feels situational, like the day, like if somebody's had a very long day or days, the sleep deprivation itself is enough to mess a person up, in terms of like their sleep cycle every 4 hours, and it's intrusive and it's anxiety provoking when you're falling asleep. And finally, and I remember like being woken up so much, in the middle of the night, and you're like, oh, great, I just shut the operation down. I've changed the diaper, I've fed, I've cleaned the bottles, and I was the one doing a lot of the night stuff. And you're walking around like a zombie during the day, and especially if you have to, go back to work. So and even if you don't, you're at home. That is work. You're taking care of your baby. So, it's love, but who said that love doesn't involve work? It does. And be okay with saying that. I think that's so hard for women. Oh my God, if I complain about motherhood or my child, I'm a bad mom, it means I don't love my kid. No, it does not mean that at all. It means this is life, and this is part of life. And why do we expect everything to be a walk in the park and rosy and unicorns and rainbows? It's not. And I think if you can embrace that you don't love, that it doesn't mean your love for your baby is one iota less. It just means that you're human and you're normal and you're responding and adapting to an immense calling. Like you're being asked to do things that you've never done. And in many ways it reminds me of like when I was working as an intern in the hospital and resident. We were on for 36 hours, and you're lucky the minute your eyes would close, if you're on a chair somewhere, forget about getting to lie down. You might be, if you got to sit in a chair, you were lucky. And then the second your eyes might shut on the 25th hour of that call, your beeper went off. And then you were like, oh my God, and there's an emergency someplace. And I kind of would joke that that's what it felt like when I was finally falling asleep, and then I had to wake up again. So it's very disruptive. But some of the things is that if your mood, the low mood, if it lasts for more, on day 5, for a lot of women, that's when it hits and they're feeling very tearful. But if you're finding that like a week beyond that, 2 weeks beyond that, you're low. And I wouldn't even wait 2 weeks. That's the thing, because you're going to the pediatrician's office, you're going to your OB. You have to be open. And now in New York State, at least, they're making it mandatory for women to get screened in a lot of the, office visits. Pediatrician will be a follow-up where you get asked the questions and be honest. So some of the questions of depression, basically postpartum depression has many of the similar features of major depressive disorder, not related to pregnancy. And of course, some of the symptoms are more specific, and I'll get into that in a second, but typically in depression in general, the basic questions are, are there any changes in your mood where you feel down, tearful, crying for 2 weeks or more? And do you feel changes in your appetite, up or down? Is there any weight loss? Is there a feeling of guilt, energy loss, feelings of worthlessness, appetite problems, and even suicidality? Or thoughts of hurting your baby. And a lot of women would be like, I would never, do anything, and I don't even want to talk about it. But it doesn't hurt, and I feel like you're with a good treatment provider, and that's why I like to have somebody established before, if you've had a history especially, so this person understands your baseline. You're not alarming them because they're meeting you for the first time. But you know what, worst case scenario, even if you have to meet a mental health provider for the first time, most of them, seek somebody who has a specialty, in this area, and they're not going to be scared by what you're saying. Sometimes patients don't tell their doctors the truth, not because, they're afraid, but they're afraid of worrying the doctor. I've had patients say to me, like, oh my God, I don't want to alarm you. And I was like, don't worry, I've heard it all. Like, there's nothing you're going to say, and feel comfortable. So you have to establish rapport and trust, because what you're about to share, you might get scared and be like, how can I admit that I'm having these obsessive thoughts? And a lot of women will say, I even have thoughts that like, I'm going to drop the baby. I mean, I never would, but what if I do? And what if I accidentally, and that's the anxiety component. So the depression component is like feeling really down and blue and like, questioning the meaning of life. You might even feel like, why did I have this baby? What kind of a mom am I going to be? So putting yourself down, ruminating a lot, feelings of regret, feeling like you can't handle this, that there's no end in sight, that you don't want to live. So I'm talking about the darkest. Most women are not going to experience that. 10 to 15% of women will have postpartum depression, higher for those who have had a history, but about 50% will experience the blues. But the blues are usually gone, they say, within a month. So if you're experiencing something beyond a month, I would not hesitate. We're in a day and age where, like, make it happen. Even if you get a consultation, or even if you go to the OB and just say, what am I supposed to do? And there are options, whether it be therapy, whether it be medication. Of course, you're going to have to discuss what does that look like? And if you're nursing and medications do get into the breast milk, how do you feel about that? What are the side effects? So those are things that you want to discuss, but as much as you can be aware of all of the potentials and say to yourself that I will have my OB keep an eye on this. And if I can afford and if things line up and if I'm able to see a mental health provider who specializes in it, I will. But just know that if the symptoms last longer than just a few transient bad days and it feels heavier and darker, then I would start thinking of a legit, bona fide mental health issue.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think, I hope it's changing, and I think it is, but why do you think it's still difficult for women to admit that they might be experiencing some postpartum depression?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think some of it is shame, that what's wrong with me? I'm not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Does this mean I don't love my baby? And because there's so much pressure to be excited and happy during your pregnancy that this is the best time of your life.
Right.
And you're supposed to, and it's when you have the baby. And especially I think because a lot of people might be struggling with fertility, that there's a feeling of, am I ungrateful? Or even if you had your own issues with fertility and you finally have a baby, you're like, I went through so much and why am I not happier? Or if, a lot of what colors your postpartum experience is also how did the delivery go? And there are a lot of women who might have had deliveries that kind of were not what they expected.
Mm-hmm.
And, they went in with, quote, a birth plan and wanting to experience autonomy and, things may have rapidly shifted. Maybe their health was at risk, maybe the baby's, but it has left them with a sort of sour taste, I didn't go in expecting this to happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a feeling of helplessness and, combination of all of the things. I think typically women have a tendency to expect a lot from ourselves. We have a tendency to beat ourselves up, put ourselves down, put ourselves to blame, feel not good enough. So the things that would bother us anyway on a day-to-day basis, I think, are magnified in this situation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so if a loved one, let's say, is sort of watching from the sidelines and getting
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable or starting to have some worry or concern about the mother, I think there's sort of two components to that. One would be, how do they have that conversation, which might feel a little uncomfortable, and you certainly don't want her to get defensive or assume that you know best. So how do you have the conversation, and then how do you support her maybe a bit maybe better or in different ways than they're already doing, so that she gets more support that she's most likely needing to start to feel better?
Yeah. So, it's funny because I would say I'm imagining the person might be the partner who wants to help. And I would say first thing is, this may sound funny or rude, but put your money where your mouth is. So if you're talking about support, be supportive, right? And so this is where the woman would not be as defensive if she knows that her partner is right up there and saying, listen, you need a good night's sleep, rest. What can I do?
Right.
And even if that means waking up with the woman, and saying, listen, all you need to do is do the feeding. I'll handle everything else, or whatever it is. Be as supportive in any way to say, listen, would you like to get out of the house together? What can help improve your mood? Sometimes it's a woman being able to take a walk, being able to take a shower,
right?
We forget that these basic necessities of life that we totally took for granted. Somebody's like, I'd like to be in the bathroom for 15 minutes. Thank you very much, without being, interrupted.
Mm-hmm.
So basic necessities, encourage her to leave the house, when she gets cleared for exercise, if that was her thing, whatever it used to be her way of connecting with herself, with her mind, her body, her spirit, her friendships, that made her feel whole again in the way that she used to. Is there a way that you guys, if the partner and the person or a family member can say, listen, I'm watching the baby tonight, or even for 2 hours, 1 hour, 15 minutes. So literally think about, I love, in health class, middle school or high school, we learned about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and the basics were food, shelter, sleep. Just think of the basic things: taking a shower, maybe it's getting a manicure, I'm not saying that a manicure is a treatment for postpartum depression, but I'm saying whatever is meant to have a normal life,
Right.
to have regular sleep, to have meals, somebody else can do your laundry. They're talking about how nowadays, which I think is a great idea, instead of giving women certain types of gifts, there are other types of gifts you could give for like a baby shower, to say, certificates for like, I will come do your laundry, I will vacuum, I will clean your house, right?
I love
So,
that.
The best thing you can do is show up for the person and be there, be present. And then if you're worried, at the same time, say, would you, the thought of trying to find a therapist, a psychotherapist, or, mental health provider seems so daunting, because the woman's like, do I look like I have time to find my own therapist? So that would be the time to help them and say, what can I do? How can I, would you be willing? Are you open? And so start very gently. Start with being supportive. And that might, for some people, if it's very mild, and if women don't know how to ask for the help that they need around the house, like sometimes in the very mildest of cases, somebody who can get better sleep and nutrition and a little bit time to themselves and just support, whatever it means, getting the help, even if it's hired help, maybe it's not the family, maybe the family members are causing more stress. So identify both the areas of need for support and the areas of stress that, somebody may say, well, I don't want your mom. I mean, granted, she's the only person we can get, but I don't want your mom here. I want my mom. Or fine, what do I need to do? Who do I need to fly in? Who is your tribe? What part of the world are they in? And how can I get them here so that you feel supported in the way? I love the idea of like the 5 love languages. And what I love about it is it's not just about how do we receive love, it's how does our partner receive love. And I think it's so important to understand that what makes us feel supported does not necessarily make them feel supported. So know your partner really well. And what is it that they need? Are they an acts of service person? Are they words of affirmation? Are they physical touch? Are they quality time? So knowing what does support for that person look like, and sometimes just taking something off their plate. And one thing that women get mad about, because they're like, you can't, they say to their partner, what do you mean you want to take something off my plate? What can you take off my plate? I'm the one who has to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And also the need that women have to want to do everything themselves. Mm-hmm. And there's something very, I think, from a biological, instinctual evolutionary point of view, that the mom becomes very protective, I feel like, and sometimes territorial, of like, I'm the mama bear, you don't come near me. But the problem is then, because we don't delegate, we end up sometimes with more on our plate. So,
right.
If you do not need to be doing the laundry at a certain point, there's certain things you don't need to be doing.
Yeah.
So
almost
like
outsource
that as much as possible.
They become martyrs in a way, right? Like,
yes.
I'll just do all of the things, right? And because I feel like I have to, and then I'll have this resentment, I don't know where to place it, and so I'll just put it on myself, and it just really snowballs into something terrible. Yeah.
Totally. I'm so glad that you brought that up, to be aware of that and call your partner out. If the woman feels like the partner is not rising to the occasion, do that early. So much of this is about prevention. And like, I love it when couples who are like, just thinking about having a baby or having these conversations, to be like, listen, I don't really find that you're carrying your weight. Or, I mean, I know this is what I'm going to say seems so scary for a lot of women, but like, to say to their partner in a loving way, like, I need you to carry your weight around here. And if there's going to be a baby in the house, I'm going to need it, doubly as much.
Mm-hmm. And also on the flip side, for the partner to say, you need to let me help you, right?
Yeah.
You need to step down from a few of the things that you're holding on to, so that I can better support you, and so that you can start feeling, better about yourself and about your parenting and our relationship. So I think there's two sides to that coin for sure in a lot of cases.
And and also like things evolve in for different people at different times. But there's the first 3 months, then there's the second 3 months, and then there's the 1 year that people have in their mind of like, oh, okay, like there's a joke about how like the one people have like the 1 year birthday parties, and they're equally about celebrating the mom and the parent,
right,
as much as about the child to have being able to survive or get through or make the best of and whatever it is. But there's something to be said about just coming into your own, and I think it takes some time, and I think you just have to also respect and acknowledge that it's a process. And even though it feels really dark in the beginning, it might for some people if they feel isolated, because not having access to a community, can of other moms can be isolating. And I think having that community like through the work that you do, for example, and sometimes through the hospital, there are like new moms groups or other places in the community, or like the Parent and Me groups, allow women to form a community, because it is a life-changing experience. And just like anything else, like I tell people, like whether it's like grad school or boot camp or like boarding school, like these defining moments in our lives are really when we're the most vulnerable, but they're also the opportunity for us to form some of the greatest bonds and friendships. And there's so many women that I know that are like, that's my mom friend, and we created this circle to support each other. And we're two women who came from like different backgrounds. We never would have been friends otherwise, but this experience bonded us, and we really like turned to each other. And I know I've made some really good friends, during the first several years, because each time there were different questions and there were different challenges and issues, but it was so helpful to have these other friendships that came alive, because of similar where we were in life at the time, and it was super helpful. But I would just say not to lose hope, to know that things they do get better. They're depending on your situation. If God forbid you or the baby had medical problems, all of these things are going to add layers of nuance and complications. So I'm not going to say, things get rosy and it's all good and, hunky-dory. It depends on the person, your previous mental health, what your support system is around you, what your partner is like. That is huge, and like, I think the best advice you can give to somebody, I'm assuming most of the people listening to the podcast already have children, but like the best advice I would give to somebody who might still be single is, choose your partners wisely. There's right. A great African proverb that says, before you get married or before you're with somebody, keep both eyes open, but once you're with them, keep one eye closed. And that's not advice I give to people. I say keep your eyes open all the time. But the idea just is, to me, it stresses the fact of knowing what you're getting into, right? So like if your partner was not helpful or supportive in the household beforehand, it's not going to happen on its own. So people don't necessarily, rise to the occasion. You're going to have to nudge them. Mm-hmm. So, that's a whole different conversation, but couples therapy can be really effective, or family therapy for young, or whatever, you don't have to be young, but new parents, mm-hmm. Struggling to define this new relationship that they're going to have. Partners will feel neglected, or like, I'm not having sex as often, or women will be like, are you kidding me? Sex is like the last thing on my mind.
Right.
And there's so many things about that in terms of, well, what was things like before the baby came, so there's so much to be said about any of these issues.
Absolutely. And so if we've got a mom, because I think what's tricky about any mental illness is that, if somebody has a broken leg or has cancer, these are usually things you can visibly see with your eyes, right? You know it. Mm-hmm. Everyone mm-hmm. that is around you knows it. But when you're struggling with any kind of mental illness, you can mm-hmm. look totally fine and healthy to everyone around you. Yeah. So if a mother is suffering or she's in the depths of postpartum depression, how can she mm-hmm. better communicate to her family to help them mm-hmm. understand, where she's coming from when in their eyes she looks fine?
Yeah, totally. So that's the hardest. I have so much respect for people who have to advocate for themselves, because you might feel like you're drowning and then you have to like justify to somebody else mm-hmm. why you need care, and that's challenging. And I would say that tell your family members that I may look normal and for the most part I'm doing okay, but I'm not. I'm struggling. I'm drowning. And you don't need to worry about me, but if you can help me in any way, like either the logistical stuff around the house or, support me in terms of therapy, I'm going to need someone to watch the baby. I want to go to therapy. Can you help me? Can you do an online search? Sometimes calling up the insurance company and giving a zip code, it's not that easy, but put somebody else to work in whatever way you need to, and just say, listen, I think that this will help. I need help. Mm-hmm. And go with your gut, and don't feel like you have to justify or explain if somebody doesn't get it. Depending on culturally, different people, different generations may have different views of mental health care and treatment, and they may say, what's wrong? You look fine to me. I don't need anything. They're like, yeah, I know I look fine, but that's the interesting thing about mental health and my brain is that you can't see it, right? So what do you expect to see? And if they're like, but you're functioning fine, be like, yeah, but no, I'm not. Or but I don't feel fine inside. And I think if they have a limited capacity, you don't have to use your 2 ounces of energy fighting them and proving to them. Just say, listen, but are you willing to help or not? And if you can, I would just really appreciate it. Rather than getting into circles of arguments, to be like, listen, and then direct them to some literature about, these are the symptoms of postpartum depression. This is what I'm experiencing. This is a checklist, and I can tell you that I have at least 5 out of these 9 symptoms. I'm tearful. My energy is low. I don't feel pleasure. And, that's to me the hallmark of depression is when someone says, I don't enjoy the things that I used to. It's one thing to say I'm a new mom and I don't have time for the things that I used to and I miss them. Or if I had the time, I would do it. It's different when a woman says, I don't get pleasure. I used to love, watching whatever. This was my guilty pleasure on Netflix and I have no desire. And I get it because the first few months are really hard and you're trying to adjust to, and you're the expert, Dana, on sleep. And you're trying to adjust to your sleep and their sleep and get them on the baby on a routine and a schedule. And so maybe you don't have time and so you don't even know what it's like. And I think you're just trying to get through the day, and the dishes piling up. And so you're like Netflix or like shows, who has time for that? But you know what joy is and you can experience it. If somebody makes a joke and you're not laughing, you don't have the ability to respond to positive stimulus. To me, that's the hallmark of depression.
Right. And I've heard a lot lately, a lot of our consultants are working with moms who have something called postpartum anxiety. So could you touch a little bit on maybe how that's different and how that might be the same and what kind of things we might be watching for if somebody's got postpartum anxiety?
Yeah, from postpartum anxiety, like you're just afraid of bad things happening. I mean, I've had women who couldn't sleep at all at night, because they are afraid, for example, that the baby might just stop breathing for some reason. And this is in the absence of any reason from the pediatrician to anticipate that. And, we all have heard of SIDS and sudden infant death syndrome, and we know that this happens and babies are at risk. And there's some real things that we need to do to prevent that. But even when they have been reassured, that these are the basic measures, you need to just follow this. And other than that, try to get rest, they can't. And they're hypervigilant and they're afraid. So that's just one example. But, being on edge, being restless, being anxious, worrying about everything that can go wrong. And then they start looking at things, the baby, and like any symptoms of, worrying about, the baby being ill or having problems, or if there's legitimate things, not being able to relax and sort of ruminating about, what we call catastrophizing, thinking about the worst case scenario, the what if, so even in the absence of any further information, let's say the pediatrician's like, yeah, we see something, I'm a little concerned, but not really, just follow up with me in 3 months with the baby. They won't be able to relax and put it aside to be able to enjoy. They're having trouble being in the moment. And that's where anything that a person can do, not that this is necessarily going to treat, but in a milder case, when you've been given the clearance, I find that, for like prenatal, postpartum, yoga is really effective. So is mindfulness-based stress reduction, and there are courses all over the world that people can take in about 2 hours once a week, and then you go home and you listen to sort of a 30 to 45-minute meditation on a daily basis. And therapy is extremely effective. Cognitive behavioral therapy, which is what I do, is helping people challenge the negative thought distortions. There's 19 or 20 cognitive distortions that we all engage in: catastrophizing, mind reading, fortune telling, all or nothing thinking, discounting the positives. So identifying what the distortions are is something that's really helpful in therapy, and then challenging them to say, okay, what would I tell a friend? What's an alternative perspective? How am I going to feel about this 5 years from now? Cost-benefit analysis. What's the evidence to suggest it? So this is what you do in cognitive behavioral therapy, and what the beauty of it is that whatever skills you learn, they stay with you for life. So, medication is extremely helpful. It can get a person like a life raft, get their head above water, they're not drowning, they're able to utilize the therapy. But, once you get off of it, the changes may not necessarily last, beyond that. So whereas with therapy, you're changing the way that you think, and you're also changing your brain, and we see that there's structural changes that are long lasting. So, whatever you can do, but anxiety is about worry about the future, and depression is about regret and ruminations about the past. And most people have some, if they have one, often 50 to 70% of the time will have both. So it's good for people. If you see anxiety, ask about depression. If you see depression, ask about anxiety.
Okay, that makes good sense. And I think, I wouldn't be doing my due diligence here if I didn't at least mention a little bit about sleep being, one of our basic needs for survival. And so, we know newborns are awake, and I'm not saying, that should be any different. But what I would say to anyone listening is that you do need to put your sleep at the top of the priority list. Even if it's fragmented sleep, we still need to get you something. So the laundry can wait, the groceries can wait. Have people step in to watch the baby for periods of time. We say sleep when the baby sleeps, and that's lovely. That's not always possible if we're trying to tend to every other demand that we also have. But you're going to feel a whole lot better on some level if you're putting your sleep at the top of the list of priorities and doing the best you can to get as much of it as possible.
Yes, absolutely. And, someone had shared with me, and another physician colleague, your program years ago, and I'm so glad it was so serendipitous that we connect many years later. But, that was so helpful to be able to have an idea and a framework of, routine and structure and naps, and then trying to have a life. And I know that, to each their own, and some people will say that doesn't work for me, or my baby's awake all the time, or like we have to go out in the day and I can't stick to it.
Right.
So I just kind of feel like I'm 100,000% with you, Dana, in terms of sleep, because, and for the woman, for the person, baby, no baby, you have to sleep. Like without it, we are, I could tell you going back to residency days, that they would tell us when we would do these overnight 24, 36-hour calls, that a person who hasn't slept for more than 24 hours, they're functioning the way somebody might function, with a blood alcohol level above the legal limit.
Right.
And I know that sounds crazy, but we're impaired when we don't sleep. So, we have to be careful. And I feel like doing the best that you can for your own mental health, for your own sanity, to be the best parent possible, to be able to give the best of yourself to whomever, the oxygen mask, take care of yourself, put it on first, and we can't forget that. And I think so the natural tendency for a lot of women is to give and to give and to give, and to never ask, and to feel guilty, to be ashamed. And I just think that you're a better person for it, for asking help, for taking care of yourself. It is not selfish to want to sleep. That's a basic human need. You're going to fall over. And we don't want anybody getting hurt in this situation. So sleep. Yeah,
I hear you. I love it. And so, Dr. Varma, how could people find out more about what you teach or what you do? Where would you like me to send people so they can find out more about what you have to offer?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I am on social media, and you can find me on basically Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, at Dr. Sue Varma. So it's the same handle for all of those. And I have a website. It's a little outdated. Forgive me for that. But it's Dr. Sue Varma, the word doctor for all of them, drsuevarma.com.
Awesome. I love it. And just in wrapping up, I know it's so hard to put, your passion just comes through in everything you've shared with us today. But if you want somebody listening today to just take away one little nugget here that you hope sinks in, what would it be?
I would say, number one, you're not alone, and don't be afraid to ask for help. You are not less of a person. You're more courageous for asking for guidance, for support, and, just realize that where you are, it might be temporary, but getting the help can really just get you, out of a dark spot. And my aim when I work with clients, it's not to get them just from the dysfunctional to the functional. My aim, I always say, is to get you from functional to optimal. And so sometimes therapy is an opportunity to look at things, for a lot of people that might not be working, but they'll never go in for a well visit, let's say, to a person in mental health, or they don't go in for a screening necessarily, or for like a quote tune-up. But think of your mental health, your brain, as an organ, number one, and anything that you're experiencing, if you're having trouble, is a medical disorder. And think of your brain as the CEO and the chairperson of this whole operation, right? So your liver does not have to make decisions. Your brain does. So do the best that you can, give it the priority that it deserves, and take care of it. And ask for help, take a break, take care of yourself. You deserve it.
Oh, so true. I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for carving out time in your day to be with us today.
Sure.
It was really great information. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Dana. Nice talking to you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This was great. And I wish, the best of health and love and, new life, new baby, new parenthood, all of that to all that are listening.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for listening, everybody. Sleep well.
Thanks so much for listening. For more great tips on helping your child sleep through the night, remember to subscribe, rate, and review the show on iTunes or Stitcher, and never miss an episode.